worlds, and we're going to use, oh, that's the start of recording. Okay, great. So I'm going to start over. My talk today is going to be about game worlds in the context of web development. Okay, so to get started, everyone who's here live, please tell me about what inspires you to make games. What is your interest? Give me some words about that, please. Okay. Yeah, so for fun, I see people are writing about entertaining yourself and entertaining other people. And for creativity, yes, okay, good. So yeah, we're talking about using web technology to make games. And the exciting thing about that is that it's very accessible to people. So if you want to make something entertaining, it's a lot better if people can play it in a web browser and not have to download things. Yeah, and so we're also going to talk about the creativity process because it's about making game worlds, right? So we're going to be trying to express ourselves using the game's geometry and to tell a story using the world. So yeah, that's good. Okay, and if you have any other thoughts like this, please put them in the chat so I can see them, okay? Now let's get started and talk about, for those of you who are following along, let's talk about the software that you're going to need in order to follow along. So first thing is a text editor. I recommend VS Code for that. Another thing is a web browser. We recommend Google Chrome or Chromium. Okay. And then finally is a web server or hosting program. And so we're going to use Python 3 for that. And this is built into a lot of systems, but if you don't have it, then you could get it from python.org. Okay. So if you're following along and you have any questions or problems with this software that you need, then please put it in the chat and I'll help you. Oh yeah, actually there's another piece of software you need, and this is linked in the Firefox is a superior browser, I see, is direct message. Yeah, so that's great. And I actually really love Firefox and I use it a lot for my own stuff. I'm using it here. But the problem with Firefox is that it doesn't do as well with like some web technology that we're using, like WebGL, and just little hiccups happen with Firefox. But Google Chrome handles everything perfectly. So yeah, that's going to have to be our choice for today. So the other software we want is the software that I've written for you. And this is a starting off point for developing games using Three.js. Okay, what is this? I have to log in with some verification code. And feel free to, if you can on Zoom, you can turn on your microphone and you can ask me a question directly with your voice. That's good too, but the chat is also fine. Yes, okay, so if you're following along, now or in the future, this is a good starting point for you. Is this starting point program that I wrote, okay? Yeah, so you take this, you go to this URL and you can acquire the software. Okay, and I have this software already here, so I'm gonna close that. So here are the files inside of that repository. Okay, and so we have index.html. This gives us like a HTML page, which gives us access to everything. And then we have a scene Gltf. I'll talk about that more in a second. First, I'll show you how to just run the game so far and have a look at it. So you're going to use Python 3, which hopefully you have installed at some point. And then you're going to run this command, Python 3-m HTTP server. And that's going to put a server that you can access on your own computer. Oh, and yeah, so Serena put the link to the repository in the chat. So yeah, please copy that if you need it. Okay, now let's go to the browser and let's see what that looks like. Okay, great. So we have this thing. So you enter this URL, which it might be very small for you, but it says 0.0.0.0, 4 zeros separated by points, and then colon 8,000. And that thing is also, it tells you the same thing in the terminal. So it's this exact same URL. You go to that thing. And then now here we have a little game. Yay. Okay, good. So we can walk around. Yeah, and you can see we can go to different levels. There's lots of momentum, kind of laggy, and that's sort of a Firefox problem. So I will switch. Let's do that now. Okay, and yeah, here you can see there's not much lagging. Yeah, so we have some controls and we collide with the floor, which is important. And if I fall, then I actually fall. And the reason that the physics stuff is working is because I integrated a physics library in with the Three.js rendering. And so all that's done already, you don't have to take care of it yourself. Here we have some custom lights, yellow, blue, and red, and that's great. Okay, and yeah, everything went black. So this place where there's this little roof, I put an automatic trigger. So it's going to recognize when the player gets there and it's going to perform an action, right? So that's not super important right now, but later on when we want to make things more interactive and more of a storytelling experience, being able to tell where the player is located is pretty important. Okay, so let's refresh that. Now let's talk about how do we customize it and make it our own, okay? And this is something that you don't have to acquire any of this other software. Yeah, sorry, this one. You don't have to acquire any of this other software to sort of play along with this thing. You just need a web browser. But if you do have the other software, then you can like continue and build the whole game out like I'm going to. But yeah, so I really recommend that if you take nothing away from this lecture, take away at least this editor. So you go to 3js.org/editor. I write that again in bigger text. .org, oops, 3js.org/editor. Okay, and then actually I can put it in the, oh, thank you, Serena. Yeah, that's done. Good. So yeah, this thing is really great. So this is where I originally designed that world. And then the software side of that is over, I guess, here. Let me make a new thing. Yeah, so the software side is over here, but the actual world and all of the geometry of that is done in this editor, and it's really pretty easy to use. You can just drag things around, and yeah, very intuitive. Okay, but there are still some things to learn. Like, for example, on the sidebar, you can switch from moving things side to side versus rotating them. And so, yeah, that's a great way to have take full advantage of all the objects you're using. So yeah, then you can add some different primitive shapes. And I don't know if I can make this one bigger. Let's try. Yeah, please let me know if anything's too small or if you can't read or if I'm moving too fast or too slow or anything like that, okay? So yeah, you can add some geometry. Let's add a box. Okay, so there's a very small box. And let's use this one for scaling, make it bigger. And so now we have a giant floating box, okay? That's not a very important change, but now we at least have tried making some kind of a change. And let's put it like over there. Okay, now let's talk about how are we going to get this change into this actual game. Okay, so in this editor, you have a way to export, and we need this one right here, export Gltf. Yeah, so if anyone is following along, please send me a message in the chat. Say, I am following along, so I can see if the number is 0, 3 people, or like how many people are following along. Oh, I lost the chat. How do I get back? Okay, yes. Good. So yeah, we need to download this Gltf version. And here you can see it's sitting in my downloads folder. Okay, good. So we have, yeah, 4 people so far following along, 5. Bit behind. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, so I see 2 people say that I feel behind. Please tell me about where you are. You know, we can go back perhaps. Yeah, okay, so get ready to send a text or type about that or talk about that if you want to. In the meantime, I'll proceed, but I'll go a little slower. Okay, so I've made this change to the game world, and I want to see it in the actual playable game over here. So I download this file as a Gltf format to my downloads folder. And now I'm going to go back to the code. So here we have scene.gltf, which is already in the code. So I'm going to replace the file in the code with that new file. So I normally do this using command line like this, move downloads scene into scene, right? And that's a nice way to do it, but I'm going to show you real quick how it looks if you're going to use like a user interface. So you take two windows and you'd move to that location of downloads. Okay, there is downloads. And you'd find that thing. So it was scene.gltf. And make sure that you pick the right one. So yeah, scene.gltf, that's good. And then we're going to go to the location where we copy that game world project. So that's over here. Yeah, I hear someone else. So if you have a question, please let me know. Or if you are unmute by accident, then please mute yourself. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, we can copy this file using drag and drop into the scene like this. And that would prompt to replace. And it's going to say, do you want to replace? And I'm going to say cancel because I'll just use the command line. That way it's good. All right, so now that I've done this change, let's go back to the playable game. Reload it. Yeah, I think Marwan, you're unmuted, so please mute yourself. There's a button in the bottom left corner that says mute. Okay, so if you don't see a change right away like this, it's probably because you need to disable the cache in your browser. So in order to do that, you're going to open up the developer tools. You use F12 or the menu over here to do that. And then you go to network and disable cache. And then this window needs to be open in order for that to actually be working, right? Okay, great. So now that I've disabled the cache, this means that Google Chrome's not going to hold on to some old files and it'll actually look for the newest version. So that's a little nuance. But there we see a change in our game world. So we have this giant cube now, which is really great. Okay, we can look around, walk around, and everything works as it should. Good. So now I want to go back to this time we were talking about. Let's see. One moment. Okay, so yes, I want to go back to the chat and have a look at people's motivation for making games, right? And let's use that to sort of inform our decisions about how we're going to change the game. So we're talking about making it fun, yeah, and creative. Okay, so I'm going to take fun and I'm going to interpret that to mean like there needs to be like a little bit of a real game, right? So like some kind of way to fail and some way to succeed. Okay, so we're going to probably go in the direction of like parkour. I think it's pretty easy to add that into this existing game. So let's add a box again. Oops, I think I add too many boxes. And then let's move that out here. I'm going to scale it on the X and Z axis, like that. And let's move it to somewhere where the player could get there, but with a little bit of difficulty. Okay. And so I'm going to lower it a little bit because, you know, I code this demo pretty quickly, and while I integrate physics, we don't have a jump feature anymore. So let's go back. If you try to jump, it's not going to do anything. This is something we could add it back in, but you know, with time constraint, I never do that. So we're going to try to make a parkour game that doesn't have any jump because it's going to be easier than implementing the jump. So I'll make it go down a little bit like that. Then let's add another one. Can go to edit and then clone to make another one. And let's move that a little bit. And another way that we can sort of cheat with the jumping is we can make a slant. So if I rotate like that, because we do have physics, right? It's just the jumping was never implemented. So if you're running on a slant, then it can shoot you into the air. So we can add that like that. And then clone this. Edit clone. And move it to like here. Okay, so this is something like an interactive game, right? There's some challenges involved. There's a way to succeed, and that's to get to this one over here. And there's a way to fail, which is to fall. And it's already programmed where if you fall too far, then it's going to reset you to the beginning. So that is a way to add some fun. Now we talk about adding also some creativity. So let's start with a very simple version of that. Let's duplicate this block here again. And then let's talk about materials. So I'm going to change the size real quick first, make it a good size. Okay. So I think that that block would be more creative if it was pink. So let's do that. We can go to material over here, and it's quite easy to change it. You just click color under material, and then you can pick a color like this. So I'll pick a warm pink color like that. Okay, yeah, so that changed like a lot of them. So we just want to change the one. So let's go undo and change that. And so if I click new UUID, unique identifier, then that should fix the problem. No, it did not. Let's try again with, let's see, object. So, okay, yes, I think the best solution is instead we're going to add a new box like that. And then that should give it a new material. Okay, let's make it bigger. Yeah, okay, so that works. You just need to create a new item if you want to have a new color for it. You can't use the clone because it's going to share that same old material, and then they'll all change. So let's make a pink one here, and then let's make another box. And this one will be a different color. Can someone give me a suggestion for a color? Blue, that is a good suggestion. Okay. So I'm going to go with a light blue. And then for fun, I'm going to add like some emission to this. And I'll do like kind of, let's say a darker blue color. And so that just makes it brighter. It sort of simulates as if the object is glowing a bit. And actually, since we're talking about that, we can go ahead and make a similar effect to what I have over here, where objects are really glowing and make like light on other objects. So in order to have that, you want to add a point light. Over here in this add menu, click point light, and you can see that affects everything already. We're going to move it to here inside of the cube. Okay, and it lights everything up. Then we go to object properties and change that color to anything, right? Let's make it blue because that makes sense. And it's a little bit subtle, but we can at least see over here that this glow is now affecting other objects. Okay, good. So we've made some changes and they're somewhat meaningful, right? So this one is motivated by making the game more fun or more challenging. And then this one is about creativity. Let's just add some color and some shapes. So I'm going to, in a moment, download this and put it into the actual game so we can test it. But now it's a good time for me to ask how other people are doing. If you're following along, please tell me about which stage you're on. And yeah, let's see how we can help together. Yeah, so I'm going to check and make sure on Discord that there is no question over there. Okay, I think it looks good. Okay, so no one wants to ask questions about where they are, so that's fine. We're going to continue. Oh, that's a good question. Is Blender similar to Three.js? Yeah, so I think I have Blender installed. I can show you what it looks like. Let's see. Yeah, there's Blender. Okay, so mine's a little bit customized, but like basically Blender is another program for 3D modeling. And so this one is really emphasizing like the modeling aspect. So you can like change the details of a shape and you can get really detailed about how you do that. You can do animations and materials and all kinds of things. But Blender is not a game engine, so it's not really a way to make it interactive. It's more about making content for other game engines. And on that note, yes, you can import objects from Blender 3.js, and that's a really important topic. So like, for example, I have this weird cube I just made. Let's now take this and export it in a format that 3.js is happy to work with. So you go File, Export, and then Gltf is the best one. The other ones work a little bit, but this is the best one. You just export, and then that is something you can open in Three.js. You want to search online probably how to import and use it. But yeah, it's pretty easy to do, and they're made to work with each other. So the main difference is the thing that we're using here, the editor, is not so much about modeling. It's more about just placing these primitive objects. A primitive object is like a cube, sphere, and a few other things. So it's about composing a scene, and then the Three.js code is about running around and being a game. Yeah, so Blender does not function as a game. That's the big difference there. Okay, yeah, so please tell me other questions. Why is the background dark initially? Yeah, okay, so initially for like a few seconds or for like a longer period of time? Okay, so the background is dark for a while at the beginning. So yeah, if you're seeing still like the game world like this, then that probably has something to do with a section of code that handles the background color. So that would be a couple places. One is main, that's CSS. So this is body background color. Yeah, and you can see it's set to 000, which means black. So if I go over here and delete everything. Well, it's showing up as white, so I guess I must have changed it later. But yeah, this is maybe what it is. So your browser is seeing a background color of black for the body, which is the main object of HTML. So, okay, let's go also to this. Not that one, instead this one. Yeah, so here I set the background to dark. Oh, okay, changing that fixed it. That's good. So yeah, it's just that thing in the CSS sets the background to black, but then we draw on top of that, so you don't really see that normally. So I'm glad that is working again. Okay, so yeah, this really changes the look and feel of the scene, right? That blue light kind of changed everything. Cool. Now we're going to come over here and let's see if this is like a reasonable way to play. Can we actually land on that thing? Oh, okay, yeah, it's difficult, but kind of. Can you go over how to import the gltf file again? Yeah, okay, so I actually, oh yes, okay. I think you're talking about importing this change, whatever you make in the editor, into over here. So the way you do this is you're going to go File and Export gltf. So that's going to then make scene.gltf in your downloads folder. And then that folder, that file needs to be moved to the folder that contains your game code, which is here, Game Worlds Workshop. Can you go over how to run the game in the web browser again? Yes, of course. So that is using Python 3. So here I have it just alias as Python, but you could write Python 3. So you do Python 3-m HTTP server, and you have to do this in the directory that contains the game code. That works? Okay, great. Yes, let me know if there's any problem with that. Now we're talking about importing that file. So I think for most people, it'd be comfortable to use like a user interface for files. So I'm going to open up 2 of them. And this is kind of like Windows Explorer or Finder in Mac, or if you're on Linux, then you can use a different program. And so you need to navigate to your downloads folder like that and find the right file, scene.gltf, and then navigate to the game folder. So I already have that one here, and it's called Game Worlds Workshop HackNC. Then you're going to copy it and click replace. So once you've done that, you've successfully imported. But if you already opened the game in Chrome and you want to see it again with the change, you may want to go to the developer tools using F12, go to network and click disable cache. It's not necessary that you do this, but it's more likely to work if you do it, right? This may cause problems sometime, but not always. And then if you reload, that will make the change right away. Yeah, so please let me know if there's still any problem with importing the scene into the game or any problem with running the server. Yeah, and I think you can even import stuff into Blender or from Blender into this editor here and then export this into the game. So that's another way that could work. So feel free to try that. It probably wouldn't be too difficult to accomplish that. Okay, so this thing is kind of playable. That's good. Let's think about some ways to improve it. Okay, so one thing that bothers me about this, how do we make jump work? Yeah, so we didn't make jump work because this is something I didn't code into the skeleton program, didn't have time, and didn't feel like it, right? So instead, what I did is I lowered the other platforms so you can reach them by like running and then falling in style, right? Or using slanted platforms, which we can use to rocket up into the air. So that is like a short-term solution, but with like a little bit more time in programming, it's not too much difficulty to add actual jumping. So this is something for after, I think. Okay, good. Yeah, so please continue with any questions as you're getting to this level. The next thing I'm going to do, okay, yeah, so I successfully got here, and it was kind of fun, so that is good. The next thing I want to do is improve this, and I think that a way I can do that is by adding walls to the game. It's kind of awkward to have everything floating in like a beige space. That doesn't make much sense, right? So let's add some walls. So before I showed you that you can rotate using this rotating tool, and that's great, but there's also a more precise way to rotate things, and that's using this object properties panel. And so I'm going to set this one to 45 degrees. So it exactly matches the floor over here. So now that I'm changing the geometry, I'm going to delete this detector object over here because that thing is hard-coded and depends on like how many objects there are in the world. So if we have time later, we'll talk about how that works and make a new one or maybe multiple new ones. But for now, let's just delete that so we don't have any problems with it. I'm going to make use of the cloning feature to make more walls more easily. And then I'm going to use these arrows to sort of move, but only on one dimension at a time to make sure things go in the right place. And if you use this flat square, you can move in 2 dimensions at a time. So here, X and Z, but not changing the height. Okay, so there's a couple walls. Can you import images as well? If I want to put images on walls, for example. Yes, absolutely, you can do that. So that is a great topic. And yeah, there's lots of flexibility. You can even put like videos on the walls if you want to. So I'm not going to cover how to put images on the walls just because it's going to take a little bit too much time for what we're doing, but it is doable. And the way you do it is by importing a textured object. So like in Blender or any 3D program, you can create a plane or a cube that has texture on it. And then that can be imported using the Gltf format, and that will work with JS. So in the meantime, if you want to stylize things more without using texture objects, one of the ways is to sort of cheat by using extra geometry. So I just clone this wall right here, and then I pull it out a little bit, and then let's scale it down. Okay, and then we change the color. Oh yeah, I forgot those are clones, so I need to actually make a new one, new box. Give it a good position and rotation. Okay. Now the material can be set to a new color, let's say orange. Well, orange looks pretty bad with this green light, so let's actually just change that color to be yellow. So I was able to change that color by clicking the point light, and then it selects it automatically. There's also the box that goes with it. We're going to change that color to yellow, and the emission color to more orange. Okay, that kind of makes sense. And now we don't have exactly a texture, but it's still like some image, right? And you can add detail by just adding more shapes, right? So let's maybe add a circle like this. Yeah, that is a very good question. Okay, I'm glad you asked that. So I'm going to go over to this one to talk about that. So the point light is inside of this object. And you asked me, does the light pass through a solid object? And the answer is it'll only pass through an object if it's inside of it. So if I move this, oops, not that one, point light. If I move this up, then the light source should not pass through this object and cast a light on this one. It only casts through it if it's inside. So actually, you can see here that it is passing through. And so there's multiple ways to do shading on a computer. So one of the faster ways is just to have it pass through everything. But a typical way, and like high-end rendering, is you only have it pass through when it's on the outside of the object. So here it is passing through everything, it looks like. And it is a lot faster to render this way. So it's pretty good to do that for games. So that's a circle. I actually wanted a 3D shape, like a sphere, perhaps. There we go. And that can go here. I'm also going to change the scale to make it more flat. Okay. now we change this material to, I think I already used pink, but I'm going to use it again. See, so that starts to look like more interesting than just a blank wall. That's good. Let's add also some floor, or some ceiling actually, because we have floor already. So I'm going to duplicate that and move it up. And it's kind of rotated weirdly, but I like it, so I'm going to keep it that way. So this process of taking existing structures and cloning them is very effective for building out a game world pretty quickly. And it's kind of good to use those manual tools for moving, like rotating and moving things left and right, rather than focusing on the numbers, because you can do it faster, right? So if you can do it faster, it means you're going to develop more game world in less time. And then you can focus on those details later, you know, after you've built something that's like complete feeling, you can then work on making it more perfect. Yeah, okay. I was actually thinking to move on to that like pretty soon, so that's good. This is the effect where everything goes dark when you walk to a certain point, and we're going to talk about the detectors. And so here we're going to have like some programming. Okay, so let's start by making an object. It's going to be another box, and then split it over here. Okay. And so now I'm going to size this object so it's guaranteed that the player is going to walk into it whenever they reach this point. That should be good enough. This is the same thing as that green square we saw earlier, except I'm not going to make it green. It's just going to be a detector object. And in the code, the way that works is if you just name something detector like that, casing doesn't matter, and you can add anything you want to this. It doesn't matter, but it just needs to start with these letters. Then the program will recognize it as a detector, which means that it doesn't show up. It doesn't show up as like a rendering. You won't see it at all. And then it doesn't have any physical mass. You can't hit it or walk into it or anything, but you walk through it. And then once you're inside this object, it's going to make like a little notification that the rest of the program can handle. Okay, so that's the background. Now let's make this change into the scene. This is the same process from before for copying files from downloads into the scene. Okay, so now let's just verify that our changes happened. Okay, I'm going to open the dev console and I'm going to make it a separate window so then I can put it elsewhere and not think about it anymore. Okay, we reload. Okay, yeah, so now we're seeing all this cool stuff we added. It looks kind of rotated weirdly, but we can still reach this spot, so that's good enough. Okay, now let's go to the code and let's just start by like introducing the programming side of this a little bit, and then let's try to work up to the detector and how that actually works. So there's two JavaScript files, one that's handling the physics and one that's handling like the rendering and the game logic. And I have stuff that makes them communicate between each other. This is a scene file that we just imported, and everything else is just supporting libraries, not very important. Okay, now let's look at the main program. Okay, so this object that's called tester D, that's like tester as in it's testing the world, and D as in dynamic, because it's a dynamic object. That is the object, the physics object that represents the player. And we're going to use that to figure out whether or not there's like ground below us, or whether we should be falling, or like if we're colliding into a wall or anything like that. And then this object, which is represented in physics in the Canon.js library, is going to then be automatically translated into the camera position. So we're always pulling from this object, which represents position, and using it to set the camera. And the camera is the main point that causes rendering in Three.js. So that's like the most important thing in Three.js. And here's the camera, and here's the physics object information being copied into it. And so the send data to worker, this is how you communicate from the physics to the main thread. Okay, now let's go to where detector stuff happens. All right, this is where I actually put the detector in the world. Okay, here's if I detect, here's how I tell if something is a detector or not. And I'm going to add it appropriately. This is not what we need. We keep going. Okay, so here on line 80, I have this loop for var d of e data detectors, right? Or detections. This is going to tell us all the times that the player was within a detector, right? So yeah, probably it's just going to be the one, right? But once we reach this part of the code, we're going to have a value for d, and it's going to be a number. And so that number is just dependent on like which one of these objects it is. So if it's the first object, the number would be like 1 or 0 or something. And if it's the last object, it'd be a bigger number. So our detector object is somewhere, I think it's at the very end. So I expect it to be like in the 40s or 30s or something like that. And so this is from the demo. It was if d is 24, if it's a particular detector, then we'll just set the background to 0, which is black. 0 is dark. Okay, so now we don't know the value of d. So instead, I'm going to go over here and just do this task of console.log. Yeah, okay, so I have a question, and the question is explain why d is 24. So it's better to say d was 24, right? Because 24 was that green detector I had at the very beginning default scene that was over in this area, but I removed it. So now we have a new detector we're using, which is just a different object. Detector just means object we're using to tell if the player is a certain place. And so this is the new one. And that number is basically something random, right? It's just some number corresponding to where it is in this list, but it's always going to stay the same for the particular object. So we're going to figure out the new number, which is the one for this one here. And then we're going to use that. And it'll stay the same as long as we don't modify any geometry before this object in the scene. So yeah, please let me know if that is making sense. Tell me if that's a satisfactory answer. Yes, so the value is returned when the detector is triggered by the player and only the player. So I make a point to make sure that this does not intersect with any other object, because I do not remember if I was thorough enough to make sure that these other objects don't cause interactions. So just make sure it doesn't hit anything else. That's, for now, that's easy. And then this is something you can improve upon infinitely, right? As you keep developing your web game world project, you can make it a lot better, but for now it's like working. So make sure it doesn't intersect. And then now let's find out what that number is. So I put this console log on line 92. Yeah, so detector code is in main.js. And then this part that I'm asking you to change is on line 92. It says a little comment, we can use console log to figure out value of d, and let's do that. That is a good idea. Okay, great. So that is good. We're on good time. Let's reload again. I have my console open, so everything should be updated. And so I'm going to walk through, and now let's go to the console area. So there's lots of things in here. Okay, cool. So the number is 36. That is good. Now let's change this to 36. That's 39, 36. And instead of setting it to black, let's come up with a new color to keep things interesting. I'm going to use just like a Google color picker. Okay, and the color should be like this really sickly green color. I like that a lot. So let's use that. You have like, let's say 30 seconds to pick a better color before I pick this one. Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, it's fine. We're gonna use the gross color, but we like it, so it's good. Now we're there, reload. So we're going to walk into this invisible detector, and wow, that is such a nice color, green screen. Okay, so that made detection happen. Can we make something like a little bit more interesting than just the background color change happen? Let's see, so we have 8 minutes left. And I think that that is just enough time to make something slightly more interesting happen. So let's talk a little bit about the code that I've prepared for you. And my hope is that you're going to take this code and maybe look into it more after the lecture, right? And then you can develop like a better place for you to make your games, like a good home for your games, something where it's going to be easy to develop more. So probably some changes would improve this thing a lot. So let's talk about how it works a little bit more. So in the top left corner, there's this little mini map, right? And so the point of that is it shows you how to do custom rendering on top of Three.js rendering. So this is using a canvas renderer. And oh, my battery just died. I forgot to plug in my computer. So I'm glad that we talk about how to make detectors work. We didn't get a chance to talk about how to make more interesting results, but we still cover a little bit about how the code base works in terms of custom renderers. So the custom renderer has the ability to sort of read from the game world and then draw something based off of that using canvas rendering and also just polling the Three.js world. So yeah, those are some additional topics we could talk about. Definitely, this is something where if you want to make your own games in it, it would help to sort of improve what's existing already and then build on top of that. But you're also welcome just to jump straight in and start making games because you can kind of make some bare bones games this way. So the next thing I want to say before we conclude is, yeah, okay, great question. What resources would I recommend to further learn about this? Yeah, 3js.org, that's a good one. But actually, since I kind of developed this thing myself, this like a starting point program, I think I have a lot of insights about this process that no one else does, right? Because this is the only place where we have like a good merge of Emo.js and 3js, which gives you physics in a game world, right? So I think that the resource is going to be me. So I'm going to put my email address. And I was going to put my Discord, but I don't know how to get that on my computer. So let me check real quick and see if I can get that. So yeah, please just send me a question. Yeah, 7291. So it's send me hashtag 7291 on Discord. And Discord's better because basically this is more likely to be like a conversation than emails. But send me your question as you develop more your games using this skeleton program. So using Three.js and integrating web technology. And I'll help you. I'll be your resource for the future, you know. So yeah, that's probably the best resource I can recommend. Yeah, okay, thank you. So I'm gonna conclude now because my computer will take more than 6 minutes to turn on, I think. Thank you so much for coming to listen. And I hope that, yeah, you just message me if you have questions about anything with game development, especially if it's web technology and game development. Okay, yeah, thank you.